All right, animal agriculture students, animal science students. This is going to be our first chapter, our first lesson in our first chapter of our curriculum we use for animal science at Fairbury here. But this chapter is animal agriculture as a science. Again, I've used the word foundation a lot, but this is going to talk about some foundational pieces of legislation and really some foundational knowledge of technologies and I guess ag innovation, science innovations that is used in animal agriculture, animal science. So, with that being said, we are going to go ahead and get started on talking about some of our objectives for this whole lesson. Now, I'm probably going to divide this lesson into a couple different video series here. But the first one here, we're going to be really talking about those foundational pieces of legislation. Um, so after this lesson, I'm going to cover all of them. I'm going to just go through all the objectives, but the first two are going to be key for this first video. After this first video, you'll be able to explain why agriculture is a science, and then also you're going to be able to describe what is meant by the whole land grant concept. What is a land grant university, and how was all of this tied together into you being able to take an ag class right now in high school? Also, throughout the chapter, you'll be able to discuss some of the advances made by American agriculture during the 21st century related to technologies that is used in agriculture and animal science. And then also you'll be able to analyze how agricultural research has benefited the consumer. And then also you're going to be able to list some of the developments that have definitely and awesomely revolutionized animal agriculture. But I probably will discuss a little bit too of how some of these great technologies have revolutionized animal agriculture, both for positive and a little bit for the negative as well, and how maybe in agriculture we need to, my opinion, maybe take a step back a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and get started here. Science and agriculture. This covers our first objective right here, where it says explain agriculture. Oh, great art again I have. Agriculture as a science. So this is the first one right here, where it talks about, there it is, science and agriculture. So definition, with the definition, science is a study or theoretical explanation of natural phenomena. It also is natural laws govern the environment that science takes place. And then it is through science that laws are then investigated. So it is a study or theoretical explanation. Okay, it's a theory explaining things. But agriculture, we know, is one of the oldest and most important of all sciences. Very few people need it to produce. Very few people are needed to produce the necessities of it, and without it, humans would struggle. So agriculture, we know, is really the science behind the domestication. Well, this is taking a little bit, but I think you'll enjoy it. Domestication, and then I'll just say the last so I won't take your time up too much. Think of that word domestication though, okay? Taming of or being able to raise. It is the domestication of livestock and plants for the use of food. So we are able to go ahead and be able to raise our own food for our nutrition, for our bodies, because we need that food, that energy we get from plants and animals every day of our life to survive. And beforehand, my question is this: how do you think we actually got our food beforehand? And this actually goes back, keep that question in your mind, but this actually goes back to, where was agriculture created? That's should be my first question is, where was agriculture created? Or where did it start? This would have been, if you answered the Mesopotamian area or the Fertile Crescent area of the Middle East, that is exactly where it is. By Egypt there, we had different rivers that were there. The Tigris, Euphrates, I believe it is. No, that's not right, but I think it is. And it was just the Fertile Crescent area. That's exactly where it was. And we had these rivers there, water was there, agriculture was created. They started the whole system um, of pivots or irrigation system, not actual pivots, but the irrigation system where crops were raised and animals started to become domesticated, and that is where agriculture started. So the domestication of plants and animals for our food, that is agriculture. Okay, so throughout history, humans have studied the environment from earliest times, and then also they observed and were able to determine which animals they wanted to tame or domesticate, which is the start of agriculture. And also, again, we had that Fertile Crescent area, but my next question was, well, how did humans get their food before agriculture? What did they do? And if you said hunting and gathering, you are correct. They went out and hunted their food, and they had to gather the berries and the plants and everything, and then they had to eat it. They didn't just grow it. They had to actually go out and find it, okay? So now, throughout time, here we go. America's founded. The Revolutionary War is over with, and now America is figuring out how we are going to become a nation. So America was really emerging. The United States was emerging as an industrial and agricultural-based economy. Very agriculture-based. A huge percentage of people were farmers. But these people around this mid-1800s, there was this act that was created, and it's not on our slide here, but this act was passed called the Homestead Act. Okay, and actually one of the first homesteads was by Beatrice, Nebraska. That is the Homestead National Monument. It is a national park, and that is what that was. People came here to Nebraska, and these were people that could have been doctors or lawyers or whatever, or just immigrants, and they wanted better. They wanted to provide. We had rich soils out here, or so they heard. So they want to come out to the western United States. It was just purchased as well. And so this whole move from the east to the Midwest, here it is. Mid-1800s, the Homestead Act was happening in 1862. And so we had all these people coming to the Midwest that honestly didn't know too much about agriculture, all right? The United States was a progressive scientific research nation that this needed to happen because we had these people, like I said, coming out, but they didn't know much about agriculture. They just knew they were going to try to plant seed and hopefully it grew. They didn't really have the research or the scientific theory going behind it. So what they had to do, they recognized that there was a need for study of area with practical applications. Okay, people recognized this, and then they also knew that the economy was emerging as this ag-based economy. So what was the solution to being able to teach these farmers really about these new farmers about how to grow crops? Yes, this is what this whole land grant concept started with. This Land Grant Act, or it's also called the Morrill Act. All right? The reason why it's called the Morrill Act is because it was this Vermont senator, Justin Morrill, introduced this bill in the late 1850s, later passed in 1862. But what this act did is provided funding. Okay, it was legislation from the federal level that provided funding for these colleges to be created that would teach practical ways of manufacturing and producing food and fiber. So this whole Land Grant Act was when universities were created or built or added to the university, provided funding to build buildings, to build this educational system to where the whole really agricultural education started in the university system. Okay, this is 1862. It was not a very popular act at the time, and it took a couple years before people really wanted to go to the university and learn about how to actually grow the most effective and efficient, or learn the ways to grow the most effective and efficient methods of growing crops, and also livestock, raising livestock. So we have science being charged into education here. And this is ag education, the Justin Morrill Act or the Land Grant Act. The leading object was to help educate and teach these students practical, fundamental ways of growing food and fiber. Soon after, Vermont established it, then it just spread throughout the United States, and Nebraska's Land Grant Act is at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. It is East Campus, the College of Agricultural Science and Natural Resources. It's a great university. That's where I got my degree from, so I would definitely recommend it. But Kansas's Land Grant University is K-State. Oklahoma's is K-State. Texas, what do you think it is? It is not Texas State. It is actually Texas A&M. The Land Grant University for South Dakota is South Dakota State. North Dakota is North Dakota State. Iowa is Iowa State. Missouri is actually just the University of Missouri. Colorado is Colorado State. And what else? Wyoming is actually University of Wyoming. And what else? Minnesota is the University of Minnesota. So a couple states around us, those are the land grants colleges for them. Okay, here is our key legislation. And as you can read in the first couple paragraphs of this section, chapter 1, these are the pieces of legislation that help, I guess, complete the whole land grant concept, which was our second objective of what I wanted you to learn here. The Hatch Act of 1872, this helped create and establish experiment stations. So we had these land grant colleges that were created in 1862, but now we have to have that key concept of experimenting and actually putting the science into practice of how to actually grow better, more efficient crops and animals. So experiment stations sprung up around these states that had these land grant acts, and they used the scientific method to actually investigate and go through scientific experiments. So we had experiments going on, okay? People were being taught at the colleges, but now, how is this information getting out to all the farmers across the state? And that is when in 1914, the Smith-Lever Act was passed. 1914 Smith-Lever Act was passed, and what this did establish cooperative extension services, just like downtown, right by the drive-in First National Bank down there, the extension office. Okay, each county has an extension service, and the competition part of it is 4-H for students. But the extension service is what it does and extends. It's that term cooperative or cooperating with the colleges and the farmers to then extend all of the services and knowledge that they have learned from the research and giving it to the farmers so they can grow more efficient and effective crops. And so the Land Grant Act or the Morrill Act, the Hatch Act, and the Smith-Lever, that is what completes the whole land grant concept. Knowledge is being taught to students, it's being experimented in the college, and then it's being given to the mass public for growing more efficient and better crops and animals. And then our last one here is the Smith-Hughes Act. This was 1917, and this actually started in Virginia Tech. There were some high school teachers or college professors that help inspire some high school teachers, but they wanted to get ag education or vocational agriculture, as it's called then, career education of agriculture into high schools, because it was going at the college, but they wanted high school kids to be taught this knowledge of agriculture as well. So that is when these two senators came together, Smith and Hughes, and wanted to provide funding to states for career education in growing this food and fiber as well. So that is the whole reason, the Smith-Hughes Act is the whole reason why I'm able to be an ag teacher and why you are able to take animal science, plant science, and all the other ag classes that we offer here at Fairbury Public Schools. So our last slide, and that is Senator Justin Morrill right there, actually, and he was the Land Grant University, or Act. That was his picture. Okay. I don't go into a lot of detail about the scientific method in these notes. You can read about the scientific method and the basic research, applied research, control experiment, applied experiment. So the control group or the experimental group is what I was trying to say, sorry. But you can read about all of that in the textbook. But this is what the scientific method is in I guess a linear graph for you. So first, what you do in the scientific method, and agriculturalists has been using this for years, they recognize a problem. They need to know, they recognize that problem. Okay, here is the problem. Okay. The book does talk about maybe you want to know if you milk twice a day compared to once a day, if you're going to get more milk or not. So what do? You recognize a problem. That'd be milking the cattle. You develop your hypothesis. Well, my hypothesis would be if you milk cows twice a day, you are going to get more milk than if you milk just once a day. Then you're going to design the experiment. Simply as this. You got to have, though, all of the environment and on the breed of cow, the weights and all that stuff has to be the same because it has to be kind of a control. Everything needs to be the same. Then you're going to design your experiment to where you're going to be milking cows twice a day and cows once a day. After you design it, you're going to conduct that experiment. You're then going to collect the data, analyze it, and then draw your conclusions and then make your recommendations on whether you think or what actually took place. And that would be that if you milk cows twice a day, you're going to get more milk. So that is a scientific method, and this is just simply, maybe in an experiment you're going to be using the microscope and everything else there. So right there is kind of where I'm going to end with this segment. There will be more to come here in the next part of what we're going to be going over, and this is really advancing how agri-science or how agri-research has actually revolutionized all of our different species of swine, beef cattle, dairy cows, poultry, goat, sheep. How has it actually changed and helped make more efficient animals? So look forward to the next one.